I haven't been injured or dealt with an injury for over 10 years. The last time that I was injured was back in 2010 when I tore my ACL. And after many complications post-surgery, as well as just through the rehabilitation process, I made a vow to myself at that time to do everything I could to never be faced with those circumstances again. To this day, I've kept my word on this promise to myself. So in this video, I want to take you through the process of how I have remained injury-free for the past 10 years and share some of the useful tips and techniques that I have learned along the way. Step 1. What are the underlying causes to an injury? Injury typically occurs when a joint, a muscle, or a tissue is stressed beyond its capable capacity. An example of this is looking back on my injury, my ACL tear that I had in my right knee. Although I was quite young, my body was giving me quite a bit of feedback that an injury was in the near future if I didn't make some type of change. I remember quite profoundly that following a game, my quad specifically on both sides, but more so on my right side, was kind of constantly in this contracted or tight state. But like most 17-year-olds, you do not listen to your body. You think you are this invincible machine that can just keep trucking forward through life. And that's exactly what I did. Although my legs were almost chronically tight, I didn't really know what to do about it. I experimented with different forms of stretching. I thought that maybe I needed to strengthen my core more. And I was just kind of trying every hat on for size in the exercise world to see if I could resolve some of this tightness that I was dealing with. So like the anti-fragile machine I thought I was, I continued to practice. I continued to go as hard as I could in games until one day my body had enough and I took a wrong turn. I got an impact hit while I was taking this wrong turn, and all of a sudden I felt this snap come through my knee. And what's crazy about this is almost instantaneously, I knew that I tore my ACL. Believe it or not, my mom had torn hers a few years prior, and she had told me about the sensation that you experience in a knee through an ACL tear. And as soon as that happened, I kind of felt almost like this zip tie just kind of gets super tight, right from the back of my knee all the way up into my glute. I quite vividly recall having sensations of just no stability through my knee, and just lots of, not really pain, but just kind of overall shock in my body. Up until that point in my life, I hadn't really dealt with any type of severe injury. The only injury that I had really dealt with was a broken collarbone, but outside of that, I had no tears, really no active sprains, and this was a true shock both to my system, but really to myself as well. If we fast forward about 6 months to a year later, I found my body and my structure in a state of fragility, something that I thought at 18 I would never find myself in. So instead of trying to depend on multiple professionals, I decided to try to take the matters into my own hands. And I decided to take a deep dive into trying to understand the body in its fullest, and what are kind of the levers that cause injury to happen in the first place. And what I realized looking back is that not only was my body giving me a ton of signals that an injury was probably inevitable at some point, but I also need to take the necessary time to actually create the framework or the blueprint for my body to understand the level of stress and tension that is going to be required in my body, especially when I'm performing a sport at a high level. And what this led me to was step number 2, which is to understand the fundamentals fully and then employ them daily. So now that I found myself fully enveloped in trying to understand the body on the most basic principles, I started to find myself going in multiple directions, experimenting with probably just about every facet of exercise and modality that you can think of. I was taking principles of gymnastics and trying to combine that with principles of powerlifting. I played around with different forms of yoga and bodybuilding. You name it, and I probably experimented with it at some point in my life. But what I found is that I was just kind of jumping from one thing to the next and just trying to combine things that didn't necessarily make sense being combined with one another. Now looking back, I'm actually really happy that I did this, that I was taking kind of these different modalities of training and seeing if I could kind of combine them together to get a certain outcome. But what I found is I was kind of just dancing around from one system to the next. I'd do a little bit of this, sprinkle it in with that, go try this other thing. And I wasn't really making progress with anything that I was trying to do. So what this kind of forced me to do was take a step back and really try to look at my training more from a first principle standpoint to see what is it that I'm actually fundamentally trying to create with my training. And what I found when I answered this question is that I didn't really have an answer. I didn't really have a intention, or I was really purposeful in what it is that I was trying to do. Instead, I found myself acting a lot from my ego. See how big I could get my biceps, how big I could get my pecs, what kind of PRs could I set on a squat or a deadlift. And although these things do serve a purpose to a certain extent, I found myself going more from a state of vanity rather than trying to be deliberate and sustainable with what it is that I was trying to achieve. So what this drew me to do was to begin to look at the body more anthropologically, in the sense, what did our body fundamentally evolve to do over time? What did my glute max evolve to do primarily? What did my shoulder joint evolve to do primarily? And how can I start to replicate that or create that in my own training? Now, this was definitely a ego hit. I certainly wasn't setting any new PRs on my squats or my deadlifts, but I did find a new sense of fulfillment and alignment with the direction that I was now going with my training. I found myself not operating from a place of ego, but rather preservation. And how can I continue to do the things I enjoy doing for the longest amount of time as possible? And that led me to step 3 for this video, which is to walk, run, and go. So the last piece of the pie brings us to current day, where I am at nearly 10 plus years later. And one of the most fundamental, if not the biggest lesson that I have learned along the way is before I learn how to run properly or learn how to go all out, I first have to learn how to do that thing that I want to accomplish at a slow pace. Now this makes me smile because a lot of us, myself included, just want to do the thing. We just want to be able to perform at this elite level. We just want to be able to run that marathon. But we don't take into account all the foundational steps that's required to get us there. And the more that we ignore these foundational steps, I think the more problems we're ultimately going to have downstream. And I think that's why it's important to ask ourselves the hard questions, such as, who is it or what is it that I'm trying to serve by doing this? Am I doing this for the short-term glory or validation? Or am I actually trying to work towards something that is bigger than myself? By taking this on, am I going to be benefiting myself? Or is this going to work at the expense or cost of myself? Now, this is not to say that you should never do the things that you enjoy doing in life. If you enjoy skiing, but you know it's hard on your knees, I'm not saying just scrap that, but I'm saying to look at the underlying variables as to why it's bad for your knees in the first place. Because I think when you start looking at life and your body that way, not only are you going to be able to continue to do the things that you enjoy most, but you're also going to be a lot happier with the state of your body. So I encourage you to ask yourself these tough questions. And I'm not here to guarantee that you're going to be injury-free from taking this advice. But what I have found in my own experience is that it certainly offers me the peace of mind that I've done everything I can to try to prepare my body for what it is that is ahead. And for me, that's a lot better than not having done anything at all. Now, by this point in the video, I'm sure you're wondering, okay, man, cool. Thanks for the advice, but this still seems a little bit vague. So what the heck can you actually do about it? Well, if you look through the library of content that I've put together, I have material around knee, spine, shoulder health, as well as just different body weight exercises and programs that you can work through. And that's really a culmination of the 10 plus years of experimentation and experience that I have trying to go through kind of these different modalities to see what works and what doesn't. So give it a crack and let me know how it goes for you down in the comment section below. I'm always trying to curate information that I think is relevant and is going to be helpful, but I also want to hear from you guys. So if you have any video ideas of different types of material that you would like to see on this channel, let me know and I'll go through every comment, I'll reply. and I will certainly add it to the list. As always, if you found this video helpful, something that would help me is if you threw it a like, as well as subscribe to the channel for more future content similar to this. Until next time, make sure you are prioritizing and then you are optimizing for you. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.